The new AP poll top 25 is out, and Georgia remains #1 for the 19th straight week. That's the third longest in poll history. Only the early 2000 Miami Hurricanes and mid-2000 USC Trojans have longer such streaks. You see Penn State dropping 3 spots after their matchup with Ohio State. Formerly at number 10 was North Carolina. They have now dropped 7 spots after losing at home to Virginia. First loss of the season for Drake May and company. And then if we get further down the list, James Madison ranked for just the 2nd time in school history. The Dukes are in the 2nd season at the FBS level. Ineligible, though, for the Sun Belt title game or postseason bowl. It's them in Jackson State. And USC went from 10 to 18 to now 24 after the Trojans' back-to-back losses. First it was at Notre Dame, and then last night at home at the Coliseum to the Utah Utes. Hey there, folks. Tommy Tran joined by Brady Quinn to react to the new poll, and we'll project forward as well. Big picture is what we got BQ in here for. So let's first start with the game. You were in Columbus, top 10 matchup for Penn State, Ohio State. What was the difference in your eyes and what ended up being a Buckeye victory?
Marvin Harrison Jr., the best wide receiver in college football, arguably the best overall player in college football. He was dominant, and Penn State had a good defensive game plan for him. At times they tried to double him. At times they isolated him versus some of their best cornerbacks. But even with tight coverage, he still made the contested catch. And beyond that, too, Ryan Day, Brian Hartline, their offensive staff, finding ways of getting Marvin Harrison Jr. the football. You really felt like when it came down to it, when Ohio State needed to play, that's who they went to. Penn State didn't have that guy on their sidelines. They really struggled to score points and move the football versus that Ohio State defense.
Big picture, Big Ten. I know there's some folks, even at our CBS Sports 133, that think actually Michigan might be a better overall team than Georgia, say. But, of course, Michigan still coming. They took care of Sparty. Ohio State took care of Penn State. What do you think about the Big Ten at the moment?
Look, I think you've got 3 teams that arguably could be considered for some of those college football playoff spots. And I say spots plural because Penn State's not out of it. Now, they lost, but they get to host Michigan. And they'll have an opportunity to try to regroup and see if they can't beat Michigan and potentially find their way in, even though Ohio State, if they go unblemished, would be who actually goes from the Big Ten East. But there's a chance because of how good these teams are, and Penn State only dropping to, I believe, 10th or somewhere in that ballpark, could potentially still find their way up into the top 4 when it's all said and done, given what they've got the rest on their schedule. But Michigan looks to be dominant. They got 19 votes, I believe, which I think you could make the case right now they should be the #1 overall team based on how they've looked, but they've played a soft schedule. And Ohio State has the formula. They're running the football better, at least that's what we saw versus Penn State, playing great defense, and they've got an absolute playmaker in Marvin Harrison Jr., so don't be surprised if the Buckeyes aren't the team that makes it through.
One thing I failed to mention was another ranked matchup, but it was Tennessee and Alabama. Bama wins, and it's not often you get Nick Saban crediting the student section at Bryant-Denny for helping them to get the win. Where are you at with Bama? Because obviously they came into the season with some high expectations, questions at quarterback, but they've sort of started to right the ship a little bit there.
I think questions at quarterback and really just questions about their offense and how this offense is going to really develop and go under Jalen Milroe and new offensive coordinator Tommy Rees. But they started to figure it out. You saw in the second half there, they started to figure some things out, the way they finished the game, and really the defense for Alabama and that student section acting as the 12th man out there, really shutting things down for Tennessee after Tennessee jumped out to a fast lead. So, look, this is more of their old school style of Nick Saban football, where they're going to win by defense, running the football and big plays down the field from Jalen Milroe in the passing game. But nonetheless, a good win versus a tough Tennessee defense and a tough Tennessee rushing attack. And then early on, Milton, too, making some big throws in the passing game, something that they've been a little bit void of this year compared to last year with Hendon Hooker. But either way, look out for Bama making their way through the SEC West.
Slowly but surely, they're rising in the ranks again, cracking the top 10 after a big win against Tennessee at Bryant-Denny. A team that continues to drop is the USC Trojans. Again, there was a time, Brady, when, and you've seen them a couple times this year, they were in the top 6, and even though they were winning, they were sliding. Then they lose at Notre Dame, go to 10 from 18, as I mentioned, 18 to still barely in the top 25. What do you attribute their struggles, especially the last 2 weeks, to?
Well, let's start off by saying this. They were ranked as high as they were ranked because of Caleb Williams and who their quarterback is. He's the best player in college football. He's carried this team now for 2 years. Their defense has struggled. The tackle tackle in open space, to be able to stop anyone running the football and eliminate some of the big plays. And that's been a big piece of the concern, I think, for a lot of SC fans. And then offensively, that offensive line has gotten exposed the last 3 weeks. Losing 2 of those 3 games, really could have lost versus Arizona. So the fact that they're still ranked, I think, has a lot to do with the fact that they still could win the Pac-12 championship, but we've never seen a 2-loss team make it to the college football playoff. Maybe this year will be different. We've had a lot of parity, a lot of crazy things happen so far, but with their schedule ahead and the way they've struggled, and in particular the way Caleb Williams has struggled versus pressure, you'd be hard, to figure, to see them be able to make it through unscathed, given the schedule that they've got coming up, having to go on and take on Washington, having to take on Oregon, and also UCLA. That in-town rivalry is going to be a tough one too, as UCLA has entered back into the top 25, and they've been showcased to be able to shut teams down and run the football effectively.
If I go to the other side and talk about Kyle Whittingham in Utah, they've been doing it this season without their star quarterback, Cam Rising, who's dealing with a knee injury. I only bring this up to talk about the Utes, Brady, too, because it looks like Cam Rising is going to be shut down for the rest of the year. So yeah, they played without him. What are your prospects of a Utes team without Rising moving forward?
Well, let me just say this. Kyle Whittingham should win Coach of the Year. What he has done, being able to develop really a 2-quarterback system, Bryson Barnes, Nate Johnson, they've both started games, they've both played in games before, but their defense, being able to converted safety to running back, to be able to make plays too, it's incredible to see what he does time and time again, understanding the formula to win and be able to compete within the Pac-12, despite the fact that arguably his best player at quarterback, Cam Rising's out for the season, and Brant Keithy. We tend to forget he was their star tight end last year before getting hurt. Him coming back, you really thought, okay, they're going to have a similar formula in the passing game to what they had last year. But with Keithy being out, too, that's hurt them a little bit in the passing game. But he still finds ways of winning games. And so he's my Coach of the Year candidate, no doubt about it. And look, they've only got 1 loss and a path to the Pac-12 championship game. And if they win the Pac-12, you'd have to say they're going to be in the college football playoff, given the gauntlet that their schedule is going to be going through the Pac-12 South and the Pac-12 championship game.
Big game against Oregon coming up this week. We had mentioned Washington, who survived, but they weren't the only high-ranked team to do so. You throw in the Sooners. Yeah. You throw in the Longhorns here. If we kind of talk about teams that survive, and it's not always easy in college football, the Big 12 outlook here, because everyone thinks that we're going to get OU and Texas again down the road.
But that's what it looks like moving forward, right? Obviously, Oklahoma won the matchup versus Texas earlier in the Red River Showdown. The problem for Texas is they faced that loss, and now potentially the loss of their quarterback in Quinn Ewers, who left this past week's game with an injury versus Houston. Malik Murphy came in. There's some concern about how long of an injury this could be, and obviously the fact that this offense is really derived from a running game, but big plays in the passing game with that big arm from Quinn Ewers. Now, Malik Murphy oozes with talent. We saw that in the spring game. There's a reason why he's the backup, too. He's a very capable runner as well, and he's a howitzer for an arm. But when you interject him into the season at this point in time where you're going to have to face a tough Kansas State team and the rest of these Big 12 opponents, it's not the easiest thing to do to then try to go in there and win a Big 12 championship. So Texas has the work cut out for him, especially with the concern right now about Quinn Ewers and what that injury could be moving forward.
For Texas, it was against Houston. For Oklahoma, UCF. And then for Washington, Arizona State of the Pacific Northwest. Huskies coming off that big win against the Ducks out there at Husky Stadium. And then lastly, we saw the top 25 there did not have Iowa. Iowa was ranked. And then the ending against Minnesota with what the Little Pig trophy on the line. Yeah. It was the special teams play that the Hawkeyes thought they had, then didn't have. What'd you see, and how do you break it all down?
I mean, looking at the play, I mean, any sort of gesture like that is going to be considered by the official as a fair catch. So it is what it is. That's not controversial, no matter how you want to look at it. That's just part of the rules. It's kind of there for player safety, too. So we could talk about that another time. But the Big Ten West, once again, is wide open. I'm not really sure who's going to end up surviving from it to take on one of the top 3 teams in college football from the Big Ten East. So your guess is as good as mine. But once again, we kind of see, and really the final year before we see a little bit of different shape and makeup of the Big Ten, given expansion coming next year, the Big Ten West doesn't really feel like they're going to be able to compete in the Big Ten championship game. But it's still fun to at least see who gets there.
All right, Brady, certainly appreciate it. Thanks for breaking down.
Hold on now. We got to give some love to James Madison.
Oh,
enters
yes.
the top 25 for the first time.
JMU, let's do it.
Shout out to Kirk Cignetti. Shout out Jordan McLeod, their quarterback, and downtown Reggie Brown, their big play wide receiver. Best, by the way, rush defense in the Sun Belt. So they entered the top 25 this this week in the rankings, and kudos to them, obviously, for the season they've had thus far.
They should be able to go bowling, right? Come on now.
Yeah, of course. Of
course. They'll get it soon, though. James Madison cracking the top 25 again, second time in program history. You see the notable movements there. North Carolina suffering its first loss of the season, dropping from 10 to 17. A quick reminder about what's ahead here. Of course, we've got Georgia and Florida from Jacksonville coming up later this weekend.